After my husband ripped my clothes and threw me out in the middle of winter, his mother sneered, "Let's see if any beggar will take you in." I made a single phone call, and 30 minutes later, a fleet of Rolls-Royces pulled up. Deep, echoing breath, a moment of silence, then a voice filled with raw emotion, slightly trembling. "Can you imagine being thrown onto the freezing streets in the dead of winter, naked and humiliated, only for your own mother-in-law to sneer, 'Let's see if any beggar will pick you up'? What if, just 30 minutes later, a fleet of Rolls-Royces pulled up for you, ready to bring that entire wicked family to their knees?" Believe me, that night was a living nightmare, the kind you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. To truly understand how I, Sophia, ended up sitting naked and broken in a cold New York alley, we have to go back just an hour to what I once foolishly believed was my home. The sound of my husband, Ethan, striking me, it wasn't just a slap. It was a brutal, deafening crack that echoed through the luxurious apartment, more terrifying than the winter wind howling outside. I crumpled to the cold tile floor, my head swimming, one ear ringing. I couldn't believe it. The man I'd loved, cared for, cherished for 5 long years, the one who whispered sweet nothings every single night, was now staring down at me like a vicious, rabid animal. His eyes, they burned with pure hatred, contempt, and a sickening, cruel delight. "Get out of my house right now, you useless woman who can't even give me a child," he snarled, his voice a low growl. Every single word was a blade twisting in my already bleeding heart. My vision blurred through tears, but I could still see her. My mother-in-law, Carol, stood in the bedroom doorway, arms crossed, a smug, satisfied smirk plastered across her face. And beside her, Chloe, my sister-in-law, always obsessed with parties and appearances, was recording everything on her phone, giggling like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. "Ethan, get closer to her face," Chloe chirped. "This will go viral if we post it online. How about cheating wife gets what she deserves?" Their cruelty, their perfectly synchronized torment, hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some spontaneous outburst. No, this was a play meticulously rehearsed, and tonight, I was just the unfortunate star of their twisted final act. With trembling hands, I tried to push myself up, tried to pull my thin, disheveled nightgown around me. "Ethan, please calm down. I don't know what's happening, but let's talk," I pleaded, desperately clinging to a faint, impossible thread of hope. But he gave me no chance. He lunged, grabbed my hair, and yanked my head back, a sharp, blinding pain tearing through my scalp. I screamed. He dragged me, mercilessly, towards the front door, ignoring my pleas, my struggles. "Talk? I have nothing more to talk to you about. You're useless to me now." Useless. That one word hit me hard. Yes, that's all I had been to him for 5 years. A tool. A machine to be used and exploited. "Open the door, Mom," Ethan yelled, and Carol, with sickening eagerness, rushed to pull it wide open. The biting New York winter night immediately swept into the apartment, a frigid gust that chilled me to the bone, making me tremble uncontrollably. The small alley outside was empty, only the dim, sickly yellow glow of a street lamp casting long, skeletal shadows of bare branches. "Ethan, please don't do this. The neighbors will see us," I begged, my voice raw with desperation. My fear, though, seemed to only excite him more. He let out a cruel, barking laugh. "The neighbors? Let them see what you're really like. Let's see if you dare to face anyone after tonight." And then he did something I will carry with me forever. With all his might, he ripped the nightgown from my body. The sound of the tearing fabric was sharp, final, utterly brutal. In an instant, my entire body was exposed to the freezing air and the malevolent gazes of his family. I screamed, a raw cry of horror and humiliation, trying to hastily cover myself with my arms. But it was too late. Chloe had already raised her phone. The sound of the camera shutter clicked, again and again and again. "Wow, looking good, sis-in-law. This is going to break the internet." Her laugh, it was clear, yet it sent a chill colder than the night itself straight down my spine. Ethan shoved me violently out the door, and I tumbled down the cold concrete steps, landing hard. He grabbed my purse, emptied every last item from it, scattering them in the middle of the alley. "Get out and never come back," he growled. That's when Carol stepped forward. She didn't even look at me. Instead, she pointed her finger at a filthy pile of household trash in the corner of the alley. Then, turning to me, she spoke each word with sickening emphasis, a contemptuous smile twisting her face. "That's where you belong. Let's see if some beggar picks you up." After that, she turned, went inside with her son, and slammed the door shut. The deadbolt locking echoed with a chilling finality, severing any last connection to the place I once called home. I sat there, utterly exposed, in the middle of that unfamiliar alley, in the dead of winter. The wind howled, chilling me to the bone, but the cold in my heart was far, far worse. At some point, the tears stopped, replaced by a terrifying emptiness. I felt like I wasn't even human anymore. I was worse than that pile of trash she'd pointed at. Lights flickered on in a few neighboring windows, then quickly off. They heard. They saw. But no one came out. Maybe they were scared. Or maybe, just like Ethan's family, they were simply enjoying my suffering. I huddled in the darkness, convinced I would die from the cold and the sheer humiliation. What do I do now? Where could I possibly go? My mind was an abyss of swirling despair. Just then, a faint glow from my phone screen, which Ethan had tossed to the ground, caught my eye. The screen was shattered, but it still worked. A thought, one I had suppressed with all my might for 5 agonizing years, flickered to life. I crawled over, trembling uncontrollably, and picked up the phone. My numb fingers could barely swipe across the screen. I went in my contact list and searched for the one number saved as last resort. It was the number my grandfather had forced me to memorize before I left home, with a stark warning, call only when you truly have nowhere else to go. For 5 years, no matter how hard, how humiliating it had been, I had never dared to call. But tonight I truly had nowhere else to go. I pressed the call button and brought the cold phone to my ear. It rang once. Twice. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then, a familiar voice, low, warm, yet strange after all these years, came from the other side. A voice I hadn't heard in half a decade. "Hello, Mr. Albright," I choked out, my voice breaking completely. After those 2 words, I couldn't continue. I just burst into uncontrollable sobs. "Miss Sterling? Is that you, miss? Where are you?" Mr. Albright's voice on the other end was filled with immediate panic and concern. I choked back my sobs, forcing myself to give him the address of this wretched alley in a broken whisper. Please come get me, Mr. Albright." "Miss, don't be afraid. I'm on my way immediately." "Just hold on a little longer," he said, and then the line went dead. I dropped the phone, feeling all the strength drained from my body. I had done it. I had made the call. I had broken my own promise and asked for help from the family I had abandoned. But I had no other choice. I rested my head on my knees and waited. Every second felt like an eternity. The wind grew colder, and slowly, agonizingly, I began to lose feeling in my body. I thought, I can't hold on much longer. Just then, a dazzling beam of light cut through the darkness from the end of the alley. It was followed by the low, majestic roar of an engine. A sound completely, utterly out of place in this humble neighborhood. 1, 2, and then 3. A motorcade of gleaming black Rolls-Royces glided silently toward me, like predatory beasts. The entire small alley was instantly bathed in brilliant light from their headlights. The window lights in the buildings flickered on again. This time, no one dared to turn them off. They were stunned, horrified, in utter disbelief at what they were seeing. The motorcade stopped, and the door of the lead car opened. Mr. Albright, impeccably dressed in a sharp black suit, quickly stepped out. Behind him, dozens of uniformed bodyguards emerged, forming 2 solid rows, creating an impenetrable wall of protection around me. Mr. Albright took off his thick cashmere coat and placed it gently over my trembling body. The sudden warmth of the coat, combined with the pained, sorrowful look in his eyes, shattered my composure. I couldn't hold back anymore, and the tears started flowing again. "Miss Sterling, you've suffered so much," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's time to go home." Would this return open a new, bright chapter? Or were more storms waiting for me? And when they discovered my true identity, what would my ex-husband's family face? The warmth of Mr. Albright's cashmere coat enveloped me, but it wasn't enough to dispel the bone-deep chill. Without another word, he helped me up with his steady arm. The bodyguards immediately formed a human wall, completely blocking the curious, malicious gazes from the surrounding windows. I knew, this entire small alley was witnessing a scene they would never, ever forget. A woman abandoned naked like a pile of trash, being picked up by a motorcade of luxury sedans. The sheer, extreme contrast was probably more dramatic than any movie they had ever seen. Mr. Albright guided me to the lead Rolls-Royce. A bodyguard held the door open respectfully. He helped me settle carefully into the plush back seat and then went around the car to sit beside me. When the door closed, an absolute silence and warmth enveloped me, completely isolating me from the harsh outside world. The car's heater slowly began to spread warmth, thawing my numb fingers and toes. I huddled inside the oversized coat, staring blankly out the window. The city's neon lights passed by like streaks of paint in the dark night. The car moved silently, smoothly, retracing the path I had walked in humiliation just a few dozen minutes earlier. The feeling was strange. I was no longer a pathetic victim. I was protected, on my way to a safe place. But physical safety couldn't quiet the storm raging in my soul. The image of Ethan tearing my clothes, Carol's finger pointing at the trash heap, Chloe's scornful smile, it all replayed in my mind like a horror film on an endless loop. What did I do wrong? I asked myself 1,000 times. For the past 5 years, I had completely given up my identity as the daughter of a billionaire family. I abandoned a life of luxury to become an ordinary wife. I cooked, I did laundry, I took care of his entire family. I never asked for expensive gifts, never once complained about our modest life compared to my past. I did all of that simply because I loved him. Because I believed in his promise to build a simple, happy family. And what did I get in return? Betrayal. Endless humiliation. I thought love could overcome all difficulties. But I was wrong. My love was wasted. Given to a wolf in sheep's clothing, to someone who only knew how to use and trample. Miss Sterling, have some ginger tea to warm up. Mr. Albright's voice gently pulled me from my dazed thoughts. He held out a white porcelain cup from the car's small bar. Inside, steaming ginger tea, with that familiar, warm, comforting aroma. It was the tea he used to make for me whenever I had a cold. He still remembered. I took the cup with trembling hands, and the warmth spread from my palms throughout my body. I took a sip. The gentle sweetness of honey and the spicy kick of ginger soothed my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. Mr. Albright looked at me, his eyes full of pity, and something else, remorse. "It's my fault, Mississippi. I should have found you sooner. I shouldn't have let you go through this." Mr. Albright had looked after me since I was a child. After my parents died in an accident, he was the one who stood by my side, handling every detail on behalf of my grandfather. He was more than a butler, he was like family, like an uncle. He was the one who tried hardest to dissuade me when I decided to leave my family to be with Ethan. But at that time, I was so blinded by love, I just wouldn't listen. "It's not your fault," I shook my head, tears welling up again. I was the fool. The one who trusted the wrong person. Mr. Albright sighed heavily. "Does the chairman know?" I asked, my voice laced with worry. My grandfather, Alexander Sterling, the formidable chairman of the Sterling Group, was a very strict, authoritarian man. That year, when I told him I was marrying Ethan, a young man from an ordinary family, not up to our standards, he was furious. He gave me an ultimatum: either leave Ethan or leave the family without taking anything. And I chose love. For the past 5 years, I hadn't dared to contact my family. Not because I hated my grandfather, but out of fear. Fear of disappointing him. Fear of showing him my not-so-prosperous life. I wanted to prove to him that my choice was right, that I could live happily without my family's money. But now I had failed. Miserably. I informed the chairman as soon as I received your call, Mr. Albright replied. "He is waiting for us at the estate. He is very worried." The words, "very worried," made my heart clench. I didn't know how to face him. I was terrified of seeing the disappointment in his eyes. The car entered the tree-lined avenues of Greenwich, Connecticut. Gradually, grand and luxurious mansions appeared, both familiar and strange at the same time. I hadn't been back here in 5 years. Everything looked the same, still opulent and noble. But I had changed. I was no longer the naive, carefree young woman. I was a woman with a failed marriage. A woman who had just been stripped naked and abandoned in the middle of a winter night. The car stopped in front of the imposing iron gate of the Sterling family estate. The gate slowly opened, revealing the familiar white gravel path leading inside. The light emanating from the mansion illuminated a part of the sky, warm, as if welcoming the return of a prodigal child. But another feeling arose in my heart. It wasn't the relief of coming home, but a flame. A burning, searing flame of hatred. Ethan Hayes. Carol. Chloe Hayes. I closed my eyes and engraved those 3 names deep in my heart. I made a vow to myself then and there. The pain and humiliation they inflicted on me tonight, I would repay them 100,000 times over, with interest. The car door opened, and I took a deep breath of the fresh, crisp garden air. I was no longer the weak Sophia Sterling of the past. Tonight, from the ashes of humiliation, a new person had been reborn. Mr. Albright carefully placed the coat back over me, covering the tattered clothes underneath, and helped me out of the car. We stood in front of the heavy, exquisitely carved solid wood door, the same door I had so resolutely turned my back on 5 years ago. My heart was a tumultuous mix of emotions. Would the authoritarian man inside, my grandfather, whom I loved and feared in equal measure, receive me with open arms or with a cold, reproachful gaze? The heavy door opened slowly, without a single creak, and a warm light spilled from within, enveloping me. In the central foyer stood my grandfather, Chairman Sterling. He was wearing silk pajamas, his white hair neatly combed, but his always dignified face was etched with deep concern. He wasn't sitting in his familiar leather armchair. He was standing, leaning on his ebony cane, staring at me. The moment our eyes met, time seemed to stand still. In his shrewd eyes, I saw no reproach, no disappointment, but infinite pity and a love he had suppressed for 5 long years. I couldn't hold back anymore. I let go of Mr. Albright's hand, stumbled toward him, knelt at his feet, and cried bitterly. Grandfather, grandfather, I was wrong. I was so wrong. My cries burst forth, a violent torrent that contained all the sorrow, the pain, the regret I had endured. The ebony cane he held fell to the marble floor with a sharp clatter. He bent down, trembling, and his hands, marked by the passage of time, gently lifted my face. You're back, my child. The important thing is that you've come home. His voice was choked, his eyes red. He didn't scold me once. His arms were not as strong as before, but they were still the warmest, safest embrace in the world. Mr. Albright and the domestic staff standing behind us turned away silently. No one wanted to disturb the tearful reunion between a grandfather and his granddaughter. My grandfather helped me up and sat me on the sofa. Mr. Albright quickly brought clean clothes and a glass of warm milk. Take a shower and change. We'll talk when you've warmed up. His voice was calmer now, but still trembling. I obeyed and went into the familiar bathroom. No one had used it in 5 years, but it was cleaned daily. The hot steam filled the room, washing away the dirty traces of that night, but it couldn't wash away the humiliation and grief etched deep in my heart. Putting on the soft silk pajamas, I felt as if I had shed a dirty skin. When I returned to the living room, my grandfather was still there, waiting for me. He had changed into more formal attire, and on the table, a steaming pot of high-quality green tea sat. He motioned for me to sit across from him and said in a low, authoritative voice, "Now tell me, what did that man and his family do to you?" And I spoke. I told him everything, without hiding anything. I talked about my 5 years of life in that small apartment, how I had to give up all the habits and hobbies of a wealthy family's daughter to become an ordinary wife. I talked about my mother-in-law's cold treatment, my sister-in-law's laziness and endless complaints, and Ethan's cruelty, which went far beyond mere weakness or indifference. I told him how my inability to have a child became a constant thorn in their side. And finally, I recounted all the horrific events of that night, from the slap, the humiliating words, to Ethan's savage act of tearing my clothes and throwing me out into the street. The more I spoke, the more I realized how utterly absurd it had all been. I, Sophia Sterling, the sole granddaughter of the chairman of the Sterling Group, raised in the lap of luxury, how could I have endured that life for 5 years, all for one word? Love, a blind, foolish love that made me willingly step into a fake, gilded cage, only to be plucked out and abandoned by the very people I cared for with all my heart. My grandfather listened in silence. His fists were clenched so tightly that blue veins stood out on the back of his hands. His face had darkened, and in his eyes burned a flame of fury I hadn't seen in a very long time. When I finished my story, he said nothing immediately. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if trying to suppress a raging storm about to erupt. "Mr. Albright," he called out, his voice now icy cold. "Yes, Chairman. I want you to investigate that Ethan Hayes and his family immediately. Everything about them, their work, their businesses, their relationships, their assets. Down to the smallest detail. I'm giving you 24 hours. Yes, sir. I'll take care of it immediately." Mr. Albright bowed his head and left quickly. The room fell silent again. My grandfather opened his eyes and looked at me. His gaze had softened a bit. "Sophia, do you still hold a grudge against me for being so strict with you that year?" I shook my head, tears welling up again. "No. Now I understand. It was all my fault. I didn't listen to your advice. I was blinded by love. Love is not a sin, child, he sighed. The problem is you gave it to a man who didn't deserve it. But, well, that's water under the bridge. Consider it a very expensive tuition fee you've paid. The important thing is that you're back. From now on, no one can hurt you. I promise. His promise was like a 1,000-ton rock settling in my heart. I knew the real storm was about to begin. But this time, I was no longer alone. I had my grandfather. And behind me, the powerful empire of the Sterling Group. That night, I slept in my old room. It had been preserved exactly as I had left it, the princess bed with pale pink sheets, the white desk where I studied for my SATs, and the huge teddy bear my grandfather gave me for my 18th birthday. Everything reminded me of beautiful memories of a carefree time. I lay on the soft bed but couldn't fall asleep. Memories of the last 5 years mingled with those of my life in this mansion. I remembered the day I met Ethan. It was a charity gala organized by the Sterling Group. He was a young employee of a partner company, handsome, smart, with a charming sense of humor. He was completely different from the rich, idolized heirs I used to know. He captivated me with his sincerity and his dream of starting his own business. We started dating. I hid my true identity, telling him only that I was a normal office worker. He didn't seem to care much about my family background either. He loved me, or at least I thought he did. He took me to dive bars, gave me rides on his old motorcycle. Those simple dates made me happier than any fancy party. I thought I had found true love. When I decided to marry him, I brought him to meet my grandfather. The meeting was a disaster. My grandfather, with a single, piercing glance, told me bluntly, "That man is not right for you. He has ambition written all over his eyes. He doesn't love you. He wants your family's fortune." I argued with my grandfather, defending Ethan fiercely. I told him he was too suspicious, that Ethan wasn't like that. The argument reached its peak when my grandfather gave me his ultimatum. With the arrogance of youth and blind faith, I chose to leave, to prove him wrong. I cut off all contact on my own and embraced the life of a normal person. It was difficult at first, but I tried to adapt. I fooled myself into thinking I was happy. But now that everything was revealed, I realized how devastatingly right my grandfather's words had been. He saw Ethan's true nature from the very beginning, and it took me 5 years to realize it. A soft knock on the door. Mr. Albright came in with a tray of snacks. "Miss Sterling, have something to eat. The chairman asked me to bring it to you." I wasn't hungry, but I sat up and ate. I knew I needed strength. Tomorrow's battle would be a long one. Seeing the exquisite food on the tray, I suddenly remembered the humble meals and my mother-in-law's constant reprimands. Tears fell again. But this time, it wasn't out of pain, but because I knew those dark days were truly over. A new chapter of my life was about to begin. A chapter where I would no longer be a victim. I sat in front of the cherrywood vanity and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. My long hair, which I always wore in a simple bun, had been transformed by top stylists into a mane of voluminous waves, dyed a luxurious chestnut color. My pale, haggard face had been brought back to life after an intensive overnight treatment. Light but professional makeup concealed the dark circles and made my already large eyes look more defined, more deep. The woman in the mirror was no longer the submissive, patient wife of yesterday. She was the sole heir of the Sterling Group family, Sophia Sterling. Mr. Albright's voice from behind me interrupted my thoughts. "Miss Sterling, the chairman is waiting for you in his study." I stood up and took a deep breath. The jade-colored silk dress that designers had brought early in the morning fit my body perfectly, creating an elegant, seductive, and sophisticated aura. I slipped on a pair of Christian Louboutin heels. Every step felt firm, authoritative. I hadn't felt this in 5 years. I descended the spiral staircase and walked down the long hallway decorated with expensive works of art. My grandfather's study was at the end of the hall, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with rare books. My grandfather was sitting behind a massive solid wood desk, carefully reading a stack of documents with reading glasses. Seeing me enter, he looked up, took off his glasses, and a smile of deep satisfaction appeared on his face. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the leather chair opposite him. "You look impeccable. You finally look like a Sterling again." I smiled and sat down. "What did you call me for?" My grandfather didn't answer immediately. He pushed the stack of documents he was reading toward me. "Read it. This is all the information Mr. Albright has gathered overnight on your ex-husband's family." Trembling, I opened the file. The pages were densely printed with text and photos. The first page was Ethan Hayes' resume. I glanced at the basic information and stopped at his work history. The company he was director of, Commercial Services LLC, was actually a small company founded shortly after our marriage. And what stunned me was that the company's initial capital, $350,000, was clearly registered as a personal contribution, $350,000. I remembered perfectly that when I married Ethan, he was just a simple employee with a salary of a few thousand a month. How could he possibly get so much money? I turned to the next page and saw the company's financial reports. Over the past 5 years, the company had consistently recorded losses. Cash flow was negative, and debts to banks and suppliers kept increasing. His company was essentially an empty shell, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. So, where did the money for his family's comfortable life, the luxurious apartment, actually come from? The answer was on the following pages. They were a series of bank statements for accounts in the names of Ethan, Carol, and Chloe. For the past 5 years, a considerable amount of money had been transferred monthly from an unknown account to theirs. I looked closely at the name of the holder of that unknown account, and my heart stopped. Sophia Sterling, it was my name. I didn't understand what was happening. Apart from the money I gave Carol for household expenses, I had never sent them any other money. How? How is this possible? I looked up at my grandfather, asking in a broken voice. My grandfather sighed and pointed to a small footnote on the page. This is a trust account your parents set up for you before they died. According to their will, a fixed amount was automatically transferred each month to the account you designated as your allowance. The amount isn't very large, just enough for you to live comfortably, but not excessively. Your parents wanted you to learn to be independent. I was stunned. So, for the last 5 years, I had been living off the money my parents left me without even knowing it? That's right, my grandfather nodded. And that man knew it from the beginning. He asked for your account details to receive the money, and then lied to you, saying it was his hard-earned salary to support the family. Everything clicked into place in my head. The image of a successful entrepreneur and family pillar that Ethan had so carefully crafted was nothing but an elaborate fraud. He was supporting me and his family with my own money while playing the role of a capable and generous husband. His hypocrisy, his cunning, had no limits. I turned the next pages of the file. My anger grew with each revelation. The apartment they lived in, though purchased in Ethan's name, had been paid for in full through a shell company. And by tracing that company, it was discovered to be connected to a fierce rival of the Sterling Group. They not only deceived you with your money, my grandfather said in a harsh voice, that Ethan Hayes approached you intentionally. It's very likely that behind him is a larger conspiracy against our group. I closed the file, my hands and feet cold. I thought my tragedy was just a failed love story, an unhappy marriage. But no, it was much more complex, much darker than I had imagined. I had been a pawn on a huge chessboard I knew nothing about. Do you understand now why I told you that you had to be strong? My grandfather looked at me with a mixture of anger and pity. This is no longer your personal problem. It's a war for the entire Sterling Group family. And you, as the sole heir, must not only seek justice for yourself, but also rise up to protect the legacy of the entire family. I looked into his determined eyes. The initial fear and confusion gradually faded, replaced by a steely, unshakable determination. My grandfather was right. I couldn't remain a victim forever. I had to become a warrior. What should I do now? My voice was calm and clear. My grandfather smiled confidently. First, you need an identity. An identity with enough weight to make them tremble with fear. He picked up the intercom. Mr. Albright, have the company's lawyer, Mr. Torres, and the group's public relations team come here. A few minutes later, a group of people in suits entered the room, led by Mr. Torres, the head of the group's legal department, a middle-aged man with a broad forehead and a penetrating gaze. My grandfather gave an order in a voice that brooked no argument. Mr. Torres, immediately prepare the documents to sue Ethan Hayes and his family for fraud and embezzlement. At the same time, prepare the necessary procedures to recover my granddaughter's assets. Then he turned to the public relations team. In 1 hour, I want you to send a statement to all major media outlets in the country. A statement about the return of my granddaughter and future vice chairwoman of the Sterling Group, Sophia Sterling. The room fell into a dead silence. Everyone was stunned by the chairman's swift, authoritarian decision. Me too. Vice chairwoman. A position I had never even thought about, grandfather. I tried to stammer out, but he stopped me with a dismissive wave of his hand. No buts. This position has always been yours. It's time for you to claim what belongs to you. He looked at me, and his gaze was both a command and an expectation. Get ready, my child. The storm is about to break, and you will be at the center of it. I took a deep breath and nodded firmly. Asterisk yes. I was ready. Asterisk in this game. I wasn't just going to participate. I was going to set the rules. The media storm my grandfather unleashed came faster and stronger than I could have imagined. Just as he ordered, in only 1 hour, the headline, Sterling Group heiress returns after 5 years, poised to assume vice chairwoman role, was on the front page of every major online newspaper. The article was accompanied by a professionally taken portrait of me from that morning, where I looked beautiful, elegant, and charismatic. Mr. Albright's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Partners, investors, media outlets, everyone was in an uproar over this shocking news. On the other side of the city, in their apartment, I could practically picture the faces of Ethan and his family. They would surely be speechless, utterly unable to believe what they were seeing. The wife they had just humiliated and ruthlessly thrown out, the person they thought was a helpless lamb, had suddenly transformed into a phoenix, a figure commanding the attention of the entire business world. Their gloating from last night would have now curdled into abject fear. But this was just the beginning. My transformation wasn't limited to my identity and my clothes. My grandfather wanted me to transform completely, inside and out. He said, a queen must not only wear a crown, she must also have wisdom and guts. The next morning, a team of the best private tutors was summoned to the estate. One taught macroeconomics and business management, another business law and legal affairs, another negotiation techniques and communication. There was even a personal trainer for martial arts and physical conditioning. My schedule was packed from dawn till late at night. I immersed myself in my studies like a dry sponge, trying to absorb all the knowledge I had missed in the last 5 years. Financial concepts, complex laws, management strategies. At first, they overwhelmed me. But, as if the Sterling family's business DNA had suddenly awakened, I learned very quickly. My analytical skills and logical thinking surprised my tutors. In the evenings after classes, I would sit with my grandfather in his study. He didn't teach me empty theories. He taught me through a lifetime of practical experience, through the intricate game of business. He analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of each competitor, of each partner. He taught me how to read people's minds, how to use power wisely. Power doesn't lie in how many people you can command, he said. It lies in how many people you can make respect and willingly follow you. His teachings were more valuable than any book. They weren't just knowledge, but a philosophy of life, the very guts of a leader. Parallel to my studies, I began my physical training. Every early morning, I underwent rigorous training with a former Special Forces member, from running and weightlifting to hand-to-hand combat. Sweat poured down my cheeks. My body ached. But I didn't complain once. I knew I needed a healthy body and a will of steel to face the coming storm. In just 1 week, I had changed. Surprisingly, I had lost some weight, but my body was more toned, more full of energy. My gaze was no longer one of sadness or fear, but determined and penetrating. My demeanor had also become confident and authoritative. Even Mr. Albright commented, "Miss Sterling, you now have more presence than the chairman in his prime." The transformation was almost complete. I had identity, knowledge, willpower, and a powerful empire at my back. I was ready to make the first move in my chess game of revenge. One morning, after catching up on the company's situation through reports, I decided to visit the place I once called home. Without prior notice, I chose a sleek white sports car from my grandfather's collection. I wore a crisp white Chanel pantsuit, sunglasses, and my hair in light waves falling over my shoulders. When my luxury sports car pulled up in front of the old apartment building, quite a few people turned to look. I got out of the car, took off my sunglasses, and walked into the lobby with my head held high. The old doorman at the reception, the same one who had looked at me with contempt countless times, now stood up hastily and greeted me with an awkward bow. I said nothing, just nodded slightly and went straight to the elevator. I could feel the curious glances and whispers behind me. They were surely wondering who this elegant woman was and why she looked so familiar. When I rang the doorbell of the apartment, it took a while for the door to open a crack. Carol peeked out, and upon seeing me, she froze. The expression on her face went from surprise and fear to uncontainable anger. "You? What are you doing here?" she stammered. I gave a polite but icy smile. "Hello, Carol. I've come to pick up some personal things I left behind." I didn't wait for her reply. I gently pushed past her and walked in. The apartment was the same, still messy and somewhat cramped. Ethan and Chloe were sitting in the living room, and when they saw me enter, they were both utterly speechless. The TV remote fell from Ethan's hand, and Chloe's mouth hung open, unable to say anything. Their current appearance was truly pathetic. Their disheveled clothes and haggard faces were a complete contrast to their triumphant air that night. "Hello, Ethan." "Hello, Chloe," I said in an indifferent tone as if greeting strangers. "Long time no see. You don't look so well." My appearance and attitude left them completely bewildered. They just stared at me. I paid them no mind and went straight to my old bedroom. The room was the same, but not a single ounce of warmth remained. I opened the closet and took out a small wooden box I kept in the deepest corner. It was the box containing my parents' mementos, a few old photos, my father's watch, and my mother's pearl earrings. This was the only thing I needed to retrieve from this place. When I came out with the box, Ethan had regained some of his senses and stood in my way. "Sophia. Sophia, he stammered, not knowing how to address me or what to say. I looked at him with emotionless eyes. "Do you have something to say, Mr. Hayes?" My formal address unsettled him. We can talk first." "I'm sorry. None of this is what you think." He started singing the old song, the song of lies and excuses. But I was no longer the same person. "Sorry," I scoffed. "Do you think a sorry can erase everything? You don't need to act anymore. Your play is over." I sidestepped him and headed for the door. Carol and Chloe were still standing there, speechless. When I reached the door, I stopped and turned to look at them one last time. "Oh, I almost forgot. Starting tomorrow, people from the bank will be coming to your company about the unpaid loans. You'd better get ready. Good luck." After saying that, I turned and left, leaving behind 3 people petrified with terror and despair. As I walked out of the building and breathed in the fresh air, I felt a strange euphoria. This was just a light warning. My play of revenge still had many dramatic scenes ahead. On my way to the estate, I received a call from Mr. Albright. "Miss Sterling, our people report that shortly after you left, a huge fight broke out in that house." I smiled faintly. "Perfect. Let them tear each other apart, Mr. Albright." The psychological warfare was beginning to take effect. And now it was time to launch a real attack. An economic attack. An attack that would completely destroy Ethan Hayes' paper empire. My transformation and imposing return were merely the opening shot. A psychological blow that threw Ethan's family into chaos. But to truly destroy them, I needed concrete actions. A fatal strike at Ethan's already rotten economic foundation. Upon returning to the estate, without taking a break, I went straight to the study. My grandfather and Mr. Torres were already waiting for me. The atmosphere in the room was very serious. A large screen detailed the structure of Ethan's company and the network of related businesses. According to our investigation, Mr. Torres began, pointing to the figures on the screen. Hayes' company has debts of nearly $14 million to 3 different banks, and they are all about to mature. He has mortgaged the apartment he currently lives in as collateral for one of the loans. I frowned. So, that house wasn't safe either. If Ethan couldn't repay the debt, the bank would foreclose on it. "That's not all," my grandfather continued in his deep, experienced voice. "Ethan's recent contracts are mostly small, with minimal profit. His main source of income comes from 2 large contracts with 2 of our subsidiaries. These are contracts he secured because of his relationship with you." I suddenly understood. Despite his self-made man facade, Ethan had been using the Sterling family's reputation to benefit himself behind my back. "So, the first step is clear," I said in a cold, determined voice. "Mr. Torres, work with the legal team to find the slightest violation in those 2 contracts. A dishonest businessman like him is sure to have loopholes. We will terminate the contracts unilaterally." Mr. Torres nodded. "Understood. It won't be difficult. Following the procedure, we can also claim compensation for breach of contract." "Not necessary," I interrupted. "Our goal isn't the money. It's to cut off his lifeline. Do everything according to the law so he can't say a word." My grandfather looked at me with satisfaction. "Good. The attack must be decisive. But it's not enough. We must create greater pressure. Pressure from all directions." He turned to Mr. Albright, who was standing silently in a corner of the room. "Mr. Albright, contact those banks and tell them the Sterling Group will buy all the debts of that company." Both Mr. Torres and I were a little surprised. "Grandfather, why would we do that?" I asked. "Buying an enemy's debt is like helping him. My grandfather smiled with the cunning of an old fox. Helping him? No. Think about it. If the creditor is the bank, they will follow procedures. They might grant him extensions or negotiate. But what if the creditor is us? We won't give him a single day of extension. We will be the most insistent, relentless creditor. We will hold the power of life and death over his company. Then he will live if you want him to live, and die if you want him to die. A light bulb went on in my head. My grandfather's move was truly masterful. Not only did it shift us from a passive to an active position, but it also put Ethan in a no-win situation. He would face a new, powerful, and mysterious creditor without suspecting for a moment that I was behind it all. Mr. Albright, I turned with a sharp look. When buying the debt, do not reveal the Sterling Group's identity under any circumstances. Do it through a financial intermediary company that has no apparent connection to us. Don't worry, Miss Sterling. I have already prepared such a company, Mr. Albright replied with a confident voice. The plan was perfectly laid out. Pressure from both flanks, one to cut off his income, the other to drown him in debt. I was eager to see how Ethan would get out of this. While my grandfather and I made our first moves, I didn't forget the most important task, to continue investigating Ethan's dark secrets. I firmly believed that in addition to what Mr. Albright had already discovered, there must be other dark corners he was hiding. I remembered the times Ethan came home late with the excuse of work meetings, smelling of alcohol and an unfamiliar woman's perfume. I remember the calls he took secretly on the balcony. My woman's intuition screamed, besides me, Ethan has other shady relationships. I called Mr. Albright. Mr. Albright, could you investigate Mr. Hayes's personal relationships further, especially with women? I want to know how many other people he has deceived besides me. Mr. Albright nodded. Understood, Miss Sterling. The secret investigation resumed. This time, the target was not only his finances, but also his private life. A few days later, our actions began to take effect. Early in the morning, the Sterling Group's lawyer sent Ethan's company an official notice of contract termination. At the same time, the three banks sent Ethan a debt notification, informing him that his debt had been transferred to a new creditor, Atlas Financial Investments, the shell company we had created. I wasn't there, but I could imagine Ethan's face when he received two pieces of bad news at once. He would surely be frantically calling everywhere, trying to find out who Atlas Financial Investments was and why they were acting so swiftly and ruthlessly. He would never imagine that the person behind it all was the wife he had just abandoned. At the same time, Mr. Albright also brought the first information about Ethan's private life, and it was much more terrible than I had imagined. Miss Sterling, Mr. Albright said, placing a stack of photos on the table. Hayes didn't have just one mistress. According to our surveillance over the last 72 hours, he has been involved with at least 3 other women. I picked up the photos, my hands trembling with anger. In the first photo, Ethan had his arm around a young model's waist at a luxury bar. In the second, he was leaving a 5-star hotel with a wealthy older businesswoman on his arm. In the third, he was tenderly feeding a young university student at a coffee shop. Each had a different charm, but one thing in common, they all seemed to be women with money and status. He wasn't just cheating on them for lust, Mr. Albright continued. He saw them as tools to be used. The model helped him access the entertainment world. That businesswoman is the president of a large construction company and could get him lucrative contracts. And that university student, her father, is an influential senior official. I put down the photos, feeling nauseous. This man had no heart. He only had calculations and endless greed. He had turned his life into a chessboard, and every woman who came near him, including me, was just a pawn he used and discarded when they were no longer useful. This fact hurt me more than his betrayal. It showed his rotten, sick nature. Keep investigating, Mr. Albright, I said in an icy voice. I want to know everything about these women. I want to know how he scammed them. Perhaps it's time for victims like me to unite. A new, bolder plan began to form in my mind. I was not only going to destroy Ethan, but I was also going to unmask him in front of everyone he had deceived and continued to deceive. I was going to leave him with nowhere to hide. The trap was set, and the prey was starting to panic. But would these women be willing to cooperate with me? Or would they also blindly believe in this cunning man, as I once did? This battle seemed much more complicated than I thought. While the storm I created was slowly gathering over Ethan, on the other side of the city, in the cramped apartment, his family was indulging in a brief, fantastical joy. They had no idea what was coming. For them, Kicking me out was a great victory. They had gotten rid of the daughter-in-law who couldn't have children, and more importantly, they thought they would soon achieve a life of wealth. As soon as I left, Carol rushed to call a distant relative who was a real estate agent. "I need you to sell this apartment quickly," she said over the phone, her voice unable to hide her excitement. "The price doesn't matter. Just make it fast. Oh, and you can arrange all the paperwork with my son, Ethan. This house is all his." She actually believed she had the right to dispose of my property, a property she legally had no right to. Chloe was even worse. She immediately moved into my bedroom, taking over the bed, the vanity, and the things I hadn't taken with me. She took selfies and posted them on social media with a suggestive caption, "Finally have my own room. Goodbye to what wasn't mine." She even bragged to her friends about the clothes and bags I had left behind, which didn't even fit her. Ethan, though initially surprised by my appearance at the house, quickly regained his confidence. He believed I was just angry, putting on a brave face after being abandoned. He couldn't imagine that I held all his secrets in my hands and was preparing a brutal counterattack. He told his mother and sister, "Mom, Chloe, don't worry. Sophia is kind and weak. She's all bark and no bite. I'll let her cool off for a few days at her grandfather's place, and then I'll go get her." By then, he believed she'd have no choice but to obey him. He was still confident in his acting and manipulation skills. He believed a few sweet words, a few crocodile tears, would melt my heart. They began to plan their future. With the money from the sale of the apartment, they would pay off the debts of Ethan's company, and with the rest, they would buy a villa in a wealthy area. Carol dreamed of going to the spa every day and going on luxury shopping sprees. Chloe planned a lavish wedding with her new rich boyfriend. They painted a beautiful future, a life of high society, but they didn't know that the foundation of that dream was built on lies and would soon crumble. Their euphoria peaked when a buyer appeared for the house. The agent Carol called, following Mr. Albright's instructions, quickly found a potential client. It was actually a Sterling Group employee posing as a new money tycoon, offering to buy the apartment quickly and at a high price. "Hello, Mrs. Hayes. I'm from the real estate agency. One of our clients is very interested in your apartment. He's willing to pay $750,000 in cash this week." $750,000. The figure almost made Carol faint with joy. She hastily agreed without a second thought, urging Ethan to prepare the papers quickly. "Hurry up, son. Opportunity has knocked on our door. With this $750,000, our family will completely change." Ethan was also happy, but he still had some sense left. He told his mother, "Mom, calm down. The deed to the house is still in Sophia's name. I have to convince her to sign the transfer papers first." "What's there to convince?" Carol snapped. "Tell her we need to sell the house urgently to pay your debts and avoid jail. She'll be so scared she'll sign it in tears. Just do as I say." As they reveled in the dream of $750,000, the first piece of bad news arrived. The notice of contract termination from the Sterling Group was delivered to the company. Ethan read the notice and was speechless. Those two contracts accounted for nearly 70% of the company's revenue. Without them, his company was almost nothing. He frantically called his contacts at the Sterling Group, but no one answered. He didn't understand why his old partner was acting so ruthlessly. He thought it was just an unfortunate coincidence. But soon, 3 letters from 3 different banks arrived at the same time: debt notification, notice of creditor transfer, and a demand for payment of all debts within 24 hours. Ethan read the name of the new creditor, Atlas Financial Investments Incorporated, a completely unknown name. He hurriedly searched online, but there was hardly any information about this company, only that it was an emerging investment fund with very strong capital and famous for its relentless work style. The real panic began. Ethan slumped into his chair. Sweat poured down his forehead like rain. He didn't understand what was happening, why all the bad news was coming at the same time. He felt as if an invisible hand was strangling him. Carol and Chloe, seeing Ethan's pale face, began to worry. "What's wrong, son? What's happening?" Ethan, trembling, told them everything. The dream of $750,000, the dream of changing their lives, vanished in an instant like smoke, leaving only the cold, harsh reality of bankruptcy and debt. "What do we do? What do we do now?" Carol wandered around the house, muttering, "How are we going to pay that money? Are we really going to be homeless?" Chloe started to cry. "And what about my wedding? I told all my friends I was getting married in a 5-star hotel." Her selfishness didn't change even at the most critical moment. In his desperation, Ethan suddenly thought of me. Yes, only Sophia Sterling could save him. Her grandfather was a billionaire. One word from her and everything would be solved. Once again, he clung to the lifeline he had discarded, hastily grabbed his phone, and dialed my number. He didn't know that the person who held his fate in her hands, the mysterious creditor Atlas, was me. He was preparing to beg his enemy. Ethan's call came while I was sitting in my office reviewing the latest report on the company's financial situation. Seeing his name on the screen, I didn't answer immediately. I let the phone ring. I let his nervousness and desperation resonate through the silence. Finally, I pressed the answer button, but said nothing. Sophia. Ethan's voice on the other end of the phone was trembling and pleading, completely different from his usual arrogance. Can we meet for a moment? I have something to tell you. Something very important. I remained silent. My silence seemed to terrify him even more. Sophia, please, just think of it as the last time. I was wrong. I'll explain everything. Please give me a chance. I continued to be silent. I wanted him to taste the helplessness, the feeling of having to beg someone else, just as I had. Finally, I opened my mouth. My voice was cold and unfamiliar, even to myself. I have nothing to talk to you about. Don't say that, Sophia, he almost shouted. My company is about to go bankrupt. They're hounding me with debts. Only you can save me. Oh, really? I said with a sarcastic tone. What does your company going bankrupt have to do with me? We'll be divorced soon. It has to do with it. A lot to do with it, he said hastily. It's all because of you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have gotten into this situation. Sophia, help me just this once. I promise I'll pay you back for everything. I'll do whatever you want. I laughed. Even in this situation, he was still blaming me. I don't need anything, and I don't have the ability to help you, I lied without blinking. As you can see, I was also kicked out by you and your family, and I don't have a penny. Right now, I'm living off my grandfather's charity. My lie was the most painful blow. It crushed his last hope. He thought I was rich and powerful, and now I was telling him I was also a parasite. No, that can't be, he muttered in a desperate voice. Your grandfather, with all his wealth, he's not going to help you? That's my family's business and has nothing to do with you, I said firmly. I don't have time to talk to you. With that, I hung up. I knew this call would push Ethan's desperation to the limit. A cornered beast is capable of the greatest madness, and I was waiting for that. Would desperation make him reveal even more terrible secrets? Or would it turn into a blind hatred for me? The cat and mouse game had become much more dangerous. My cold rejection was like throwing a bucket of icy water on Ethan's last ember of hope. Desperation instantly transformed into blind rage. He could no longer think clearly. Instead of trying to solve the problem, he directed his fury at his own family. I didn't need to have anyone watch to imagine the scene that would unfold in that apartment. A monumental fight surely broke out. Ethan would blame Carol and Chloe, accusing them that their greed and ignorance had led him to a dead end. And Carol and Chloe, with their dreams of wealth shattered, would not stand idly by. They would accuse Ethan of being useless, incompetent, unable to control his wife and provide for his family. A family built on lies and self-interest. In the face of the storm, the first thing they did was tear each other apart. Just as I expected, a few hours later, Mr. Albright reported, Miss Sterling, the neighbors have reported a very loud fight at Mr. Hayes's home with sounds of things breaking. I smirked. Perfect. Let that fire burn brighter. While his family was mired in internal strife, I began to move my next piece. This time, the target was not just Ethan, but his entire network of scams. I called the 3 women Mr. Albright had investigated, the young model, Laura, the wealthy businesswoman, Mrs. Beaumont, and the university student, Emily. I didn't reveal my identity. I had Mr. Albright arrange individual meetings, posing as a journalist investigating romance scams in high society. All 3, after some hesitation, agreed to meet. Perhaps deep down, they also harbored suspicions about the perfect man, that was Ethan. The first meeting was with Laura. We met in a high-end coffee shop. Laura appeared stunning, but her eyes betrayed a deep fatigue. When I mentioned Ethan, she was very cautious at first, insisting he was a wonderful man and a successful entrepreneur. I wasn't in a hurry. I simply placed a file on the table. Miss Laura, this is the information we have gathered. I think you should take a look. Laura, out of curiosity, opened the file. Inside was evidence of how Ethan had used her fame to secure advertising contracts and then pocketed a significant portion of the commission. There was also an audio recording of Ethan telling a friend that Lara was an airhead who was easy to manipulate. As she read, Lara's face grew paler and paler. When she finished, she clutched the file in her hands.